Good evening, and welcome to a very special event, the first recipient's Keynes Prize lecture of the Charleston-EFG John Maynard Keynes Prize. The impulse to celebrate and commemorate the work and legacy of John Maynard Keynes initially came from Keith Gapp, Head of Strategy and Marketing at EFG International, who studied economics at King's College, Cambridge, which was closely associated with Keynes from his student days into his adult life. This desire coincided with the aspirations of the Charleston Trust, which was seeking a way to pay tribute to Keynes, one of the most influential members of the Bloomsbury Group. As many of you will know, Keynes wrote The Economic Consequences of the Peace while staying at Charleston, and subsequently moved to Tilton, just a stroll across the field away to our east. Keynes embodies the radical interdisciplinary nature of the Charleston milieu. The Charleston-EFG John Maynard Keynes Prize was jointly conceived by Keith Gapp and the Charleston Trust. EFG has a long-standing relationship with Charleston and sponsors our 2 literary festivals, as well as many other cultural projects across the globe. The prize recognises an individual of any nationality of exceptional and interdisciplinary talents in the spirit of John Maynard Keynes' work, life and legacy. I'm therefore deeply honoured to be able to welcome Professor Amartya Sen to Charleston. Thomas W. Lamont University Professor and Professor of Economics and Philosophy at Harvard University and Senior Fellow at the Harvard Society of Fellows, Amartya Sen was Master of Trinity College, Cambridge, between 1998 and 2004. Amartya Sen has served as President of the Econometric Society, the American Economic Association, the Indian Economic Association, and the International Economic Association, and was formerly Honorary President of Oxfam, and is now its Honorary Advisor. Professor Sen's research has ranged over social choice theory, economic theory, ethics and political philosophy, welfare economics, theory of measurement, decision theory, development economics, public health, and gender studies. His books have been translated into more than 30 languages and include Development as Freedom, Rationality and Freedom, The Argumentative Indian, Identity and Violence, and The Idea of Justice. Our chair for today is Dame Liz Forgan. Liz is a journalist, and she has filled several roles in public life, including Chair of the Heritage Lottery Fund, Chair of Arts Council England, Chair of the Scott Trust, owner of The Guardian and Observer, and is currently Chair of the National Youth Orchestra, the Bristol Old Vic, and a Deputy Chair of the British Museum, amongst many other prominent positions. Last year, Liz agreed to become Chair of the Judges of the Charleston-EFG John Maynard Keynes Prize, so it is a great pleasure and very fitting that she should chair tonight's event with Amartya Sen. So please join me in giving a resounding welcome to Professor Amartya Sen, the first recipient of the Charleston-EFG John Maynard Keynes Prize, and Dame Liz Forgan.
Thank you, Alistair, and good evening, everybody, and welcome. What will happen now, I hope, is that in 2 seconds, I will ask Amartya to stand and give us his thoughts for this evening. The prize that we are about to award later on, it will, we hope, always be marked by a special piece of work and a special lecture by the prize recipient. That's why we are sitting in this tent tonight about to hear this wonderful treat. At the end of Amartya's remarks, I will, if there's time, I will open the discussion to the floor for a little while, and then we will, at the end of all that, award the prize. The first winner of this prize was always going to need to be an outstanding thinker. The judges wanted something more. We wanted to reflect both the humanity and the game-changing nature of Keynes. something more than a brilliant academic or a technical economist. I have to tell you, it was enormous fun doing. We could have had anyone in the world. Who do you think? Yes, we ranged over everybody, but it didn't take us very long to come to a conclusion. As Alistair said, Amartya Sen is famous around the world for his work on social choice theory, but the reason that he is the perfect first recipient of this prize is that he's applied that theoretical work to some of the most urgent and pressing challenges affecting the lives of human beings: poverty, inequality, unemployment, famine, personal liberties and gender issues. And he shares with Keynes the real achievement of making the lives of people better because of the power of his thinking. People with enormous brains who also have enormous hearts are rare and precious commodities, and we're privileged to have one of them to speak to us tonight, Amartya Sen.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Leif, for your very kind remarks and also the very kind welcome I received earlier, and obviously feel enormously elated and not quite able to adequately thank the good fortune of getting this award and also of having this meeting today, and thank you all for coming to this occasion. The title I chose for the talk is The Economic Consequences of Austerity, which is actually clearly derived from Keynes. So I start off from that. On the 5th of June of 1919, John Maynard Keynes wrote to the Prime Minister of Britain, David Lloyd George, "I ought to let you know that on Saturday I'm slipping away from this scene of nightmare. I can do no more good here," unquote. Thus ended Keynes's role as the official representative of the British Treasury at the Paris Peace Conference. It liberated Keynes from complicity in the Treaty of Versailles, to be signed later that month, a treaty which he detested. Why did Keynes dislike a treaty that ended the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers? Surely a good thing. But before trying to answer that question, I must ask another. Why am I telling you all this? How could Keynes's grumble about Versailles Treaty nearly 100 years ago be of any conceivable interest to people attending the Charleston Festival today? Keynes was not, of course, complaining about the end of the World War, nor about the need for a treaty to end it, but about the terms of the treaty, and in particular the suffering and the economic turmoil forced on the defeated enemy, the Germans, through imposed austerity. Austerity is a subject of much contemporary interest in Europe. I'd like to add the word "unfortunately" somewhere in that sentence. Actually, the book that Keynes wrote, attacking the treaty already referred to, called The Economic Consequences of the Peace, which was actually written over here, was very substantially about the economic consequences of imposed austerity. Germany had lost the battle already, and the treaty was about about what the defeated enemy would be required to do, including what it should have to pay to the victors. The term Carthaginian peace, as Keynes saw it, recollecting the Roman treatment of the defeated Carthage following the Punic Wars, included the imposition of an unrealistically huge burden of reparation in Germany, and that's why he thought there was a Carthaginian peace, a task that Germany could not carry out without ruining its economy. Since the terms also had the effect of fostering animosity between the victors and the vanquished, and in addition would economically do no good to the rest of Europe, Keynes had nothing but contempt for the decision of the victorious four, Britain, France, Italy, and the United States, to demand something from Germany that was hurtful for the vanquished and unhelpful for all. The high-minded moral theory, moral rhetoric in favor of the harsh imposition of austerity on Germany that Keynes complained about came particularly from Lord Cunliffe and Lord Sumner, representing Britain in the Reparations Commission, whom, that is Cunliffe and Sumner, Keynes liked to call, quote-unquote, the heavenly twins. In his parting letter to Lord Lloyd George, Keynes added, "I leave the twins to gloat over the devastation of Europe." Grand rhetoric on the necessity of imposing austerity to remove an economic and moral impropriety in Greece and elsewhere may come these days more frequently from Berlin itself, with the changed role of Germany in today's world. But the unfavorable consequences that Keynes feared would follow from severe and, in Keynes's judgment, unreasoned imposition of austerity remains relevant today with an altered geography of the morally upright discipliner and the errant to be disciplined. Aside from Keynes's fear of economic ruin of a country, in this case Germany, through the merciless scheduling of demanded payments, he also analyzed the bad consequence on other countries in Europe of the economic collapse of one of their partners, in this case Germany. The thesis of economic interdependence, which Keynes would pursue more fully later, including in his most famous book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, to be published in 1937, makes an early appearance in this book in the context of his critique of the Versailles Treaty. I'm quoting from Keynes now: "An inefficient, unemployed, disorganized Europe faces us, torn by internal strife and international hate, fighting, starving, pillaging, and lying," unquote. If some of these problems are visible in Europe today, as I believe to some extent they are, we have to ask, why is this so? 2015 is not really anything like 1919. And yet, why do the same words, taken entirely out of context, look as if there is a fitting context for at least a part of them right now? I should move on to that question now, but must also accommodate a contrary concern before that. If austerity is as counterproductive as Keynes thought, how come it seems to deliver electoral victories, at least in this country? Indeed, what truth is there in the explanatory statement in the Financial Times, aired shortly after the Conservative victory in the recent elections, coming from a leading historian, Neil Ferguson, who I should explain is a close friend of mine. Our friendship seems to thrive on our persistent disagreement. Neil's headline was, "Labour should blame Keynes for their election defeat," unquote. If the point of view that Ferguson airs is basically right, and that reading is shared by several other commentators as well, the imposed austerity we are going through is not a useless nightmare, as Keynes' analysis would make us believe, but more like a strenuous workout for a healthier future, as the champions of austerity have always claimed. And it is, in this view, a future that is beginning to unfold already in our time, at least in Britain, appreciated by grateful voters. Is that the real story now? And more generally, could the heavenly twins have been right all along? There are many odd features of the experience of the world since the crisis of 2008, which began in the United States. One of them is that what began as a clear failure of the market economy, particularly fed by the misbehavior of financial institutions, soon looked like a problem of an overstretched state. The crisis, when it came, was seen, rightly I believe, as a failure of the operation of private financial institutions and led to a huge demand for reinstating some of the state regulations, particularly of the financial market, that had been gradually eliminated in the US economy through piecemeal eradication, beginning in the Reagan presidency, but continuing through Democratic administrations, including that of Bill Clinton. However, after the massive decline of financial markets and of business confidence had been halted, after that had happened, and to some extent reversed through the intervention of the state, especially through stimulating the economy, often paid for by very heavy public borrowing, the state ended up having large debts to deal with. The demand for a smaller government, which had begun earlier, is in fact constantly present in America, led by those who were skeptical of public services and state provisions, now became a loud chorus, with political leaders competing with each other in frightening people with the idea that the economy could not but collapse under the burden of public debt. Similarly, at the international level, the global free fall following the 2008 crisis was largely halted by the move under the visionary leadership, I believe, of Gordon Brown, for a meeting of the governments of the newly formed G20 countries in April 2009 in London, each promising to do their best not to feed the downward spiral by domestic complicity. This, a rather big move, turned a page in the history of the crisis successfully and stopped the free fall, but soon the story changed, with the government being asked to get out of the way before